Sometimes when we're web scraping, it seems bizarre. Node can't find the elements that we can clearly see on the front end. And in fact, when we print out the HTML, it looks completely different from the element tree that we can see in developer tools. That's normally because there's a JavaScript framework that has managed to build a UI that is mounted when the HTML page is served. And so the approach of getting the HTML and parsing it is not going to be enough. Hi, I'm Kevin. Welcome to Do Learning, where we do to learn and learn by doing. And in this video, we're going to show how we can automate Chrome and use that to be able to scrape websites of any type. Let's dive in. I love making projects, and the Instructables website is one I come back to again and again to try to come up with ideas of things I want to build and make and do. If I go into the Chrome DevTools and turn off JavaScript and refresh this page, I can see it's a very different page. In fact, all I have is this heading and this footer. The whole centerpiece is being mounted by React. And so because I've turned off JavaScript, I can't actually see it. If I re-enable JavaScript and refresh this page, I'm able to see a much fuller and more interesting website. So what I would like to do is I would like to get Node to get this website and get all of the titles that exist on each of these cards, as well as the number of views and favorites, and then persist that to a file system. Now we could use the same approach if we're looking at an e-commerce store or a news site or some other website. But as always, we want to make sure we stay within inside the terms of service of any website that we're going to be able to scrape. Let's be good digital citizens. Okay, I have a completely empty project here. The first thing I'll do is I'll npm init-y to initialize this project, which will create my package.json. And I'm going to install Puppeteer. I often get the spelling of this wrong, so I hope I get it right here. Now this is going to take longer than a lot of other libraries because as well as the JavaScript that's being downloaded, it's also downloading an instance of Chromium. And that's a web browser that Node is going to be able to interact with and be in control of. Awesome. With that done, let's create an index.js file and dive in. At the top of the file, I'm just going to import Puppeteer. And because Puppeteer is going to be automating things that are going to take time, network requests take time to come back, we're going to wrap all of our work in an async function. So async function, I'll just call it run, and I'll invoke it at the bottom. So what I want to do, I want to create a browser instance. Inside of that browser instance, I want to create a tab, and I want to get that tab to go somewhere. And then I want to maybe take a screenshot when I get there. That seems like a good start. So let's create our browser. So const browser. It's going to be await puppeteer.launch. Now by default, this browser launches in headless mode, which means we can't see it. And headless Chrome was until recently a completely separate browser instance. So you had headless Chrome and you had normal Chrome, and they were kind of developed separately, which led to a lot of other bugs. So as I record this video, there's a deprecation warning that suggests that we should use headless new as an options object here. And that's using a new merged headless and non-headless Chromium so that we can reduce bugs in the future. So I'm going to do that. Once I've got my browser, I'm going to get a new page. This is our tab. So I'll do browser.new page. And then I'll get my page to go to, well, the URL for my project page I had a second ago. So let's go get the URL. So go to here. Awesome. Then I'll take a screenshot. And screenshot takes an options object of the path. So I'll just call it instructable.png. And finally, I'll close the browser. Otherwise, it will just keep running forever and ever. Okay. Let's run node index and wait for the file to appear in my file tree over here. Awesome. So I do get a screenshot, and I do get slightly better than the HTML with no JavaScript on, because I have these things appearing, but you can see these cards haven't finished fully rendering. And that's because when I've taken the screenshot, there's still network requests out to be able to get those images, and so they just haven't arrived in time. So in between the go to and the screenshot, I can await for page.wait for network idle and invoke that. Let's run again. Let's see what happens to our image now. Great, we now have images. What we don't have though is the full page. We've only got that viewport, that first bit that the browser can see. The screenshot options object can take another property, full page, which we can set equal to true. Now when we run it, it's going to take a screenshot of the whole of the page, even what's not visible in the viewport. So we see it, we get this really narrow, long web page. So if we zoom in, we can see we get the images and everything looking good. As we scroll down, the images aren't there. That's not a network problem, that's lazy image loading. So our browser's being super intelligent and it's only showing the images that we can see and we're going to see very soon as we scroll down. And these other images just haven't been fetched yet. We would need to automate scrolling down the page if we wanted to see all of these. But what we can see is that the structure for this page is right. There are 60 of these records on this page. Yeah, it's looking good. Taking screenshots is great if you want to monitor a site over time. You can programmatically compare the screenshots and decide if there's something's changed unexpectedly, and then you can do something about that. I'm going to comment that out because that's not what I want to do. Instead, what I want to do is get those titles. Like with all web scraping, the way to do this is to get to know the site. So let me right click and inspect this particular card. So I can see all these cards are in a div with the class cards __ Y8TVU. Now, what I know is that these letters at the end can change. So when I want to identify this class, I want to identify a class that starts with cards __. And we'll look at how we can do that. And each of the cards is one of these. It's an IBL, that's instructable, IBL card __, and then these five characters again. And again, they can change over time. So I just want a class that starts with IBL card __. So I want to get all the IBL cards __, and there should be 60 of them. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to get the projects by awaiting page.evaluate. Take the callback function, and everything inside here is going to be in the browser's console. So in JavaScript of the browser, not in Node. So it's Node has started up Chromium, and now we're inside of Chromium, inside of our automated Chromium. And that means I've got access to things like document.query selector all, which is brilliant because document.query selector all allows me to look for all the classes that begin with IBL card __. Okay, so I'm going to assign that to cards. And that comes back as a node list. A node list is not an array, so it doesn't have all of the array methods like map, which I actually want, because I want to go through each card and extract some key data from it. So I'm going to wrap this in array.from, so I can turn that into a normal array. And then I'm going to map over it. So I'm going to say for each card, well, let's start with just getting the title. I want to get the title, so I'll have this, and I want to return the title here. And when we've done all this mapping, we will then return our cards. And so when we're back in Node land now, we should just have an array of 60 objects that say title with empty quotes. And just to prove that there are 60 of them, let's do projects.length. We'll run that again. So there's 60 of them. Brill. But I actually want the titles. So let's go back to our cards and have a look at the card, and in particular have a look at the title. So I can see this title is text inside of a strong, which is inside of a div. Okay, so that's probably enough uniqueness to help me get there. So I want to, instead of just the title, I want to say from the card, can I do a query selector on the card? And I'm trying to find a div which contains a strong, and then get the text content that exists inside of that. Let's remove the .length from our console log here, and I get all the titles. Brill. So I have all the titles. The other things I want are the number of likes or favorites the number of views, and the URL is going on here. So let's have a look at the likes. So these are existing in a class called stats underscore underscore and then 5 letters. And then inside of that, we've got 2 divs, one for the favorites and one for the views. So the first is always the favorites, the second is always the views. So I can do query selector all to get the stats. And then there'll be 2 divs inside of that. So the divs inside of query selector all, the first one's going to be the favorites and the second's going to be the views. Okay, let's see how we might do that then. So there are 2 things. So it's going to be card.querySelectorAll. And I want inside of that card, can you give me all the classes which start with stats underscore underscore and the divs inside of those. Such as give me the 2 divs that exist inside of there. And for each of those divs, I just want their text content. So I'll map over them. That's why I've wrapped it in an array. I'll say l.textContent. Now this is going to return an array with 2 elements in it. The first element is going to be the number of favorites, and the second element is going to be the number of views. So I'm going to destructure those. I'm going to say favorites and views are going to be destructured from the array that's being returned here. Let's just tidy that up a little bit. And then let's return it. So favorites and views. Let's run our code now. Awesome. So we've got the number of favorites and the number of views for each of these projects that are ready to go. Amazing. The last thing I want then is the URL. And the URL is, if we find it, inspect. So it's an A tag, but it's the only A tag inside of this card. So we find the A tag and then we get the href, then we're ready to go. So I'll get the URL, which is going to be card.querySelector. And what I want from that, I want the A tag. And what I want from the A tag, I want the href. Let's pass on the URL here. And we're ready to go. Running the code. And now we have all the data we might want from that website. We've got the title, the favorites, the views, and the URL from each of those cards. Now with that data, we can now persist that to the file system. We could do some other work. We could work out, hey, have this project already exist? Is this a project I want to do? And sort them and do some other work I might want to handle. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just make a better string than printing that out. So I'll create a formatted output. So const formatted output. I'll say here's a list of the Instructables project page on, and I'll put today's date. And now I want to map over this projects variable. So I'll say projects.map. And for each project, I want to return another string. Okay, and the string I want to return is dash the project title with its URL in brackets, project URL, and with project.views, views, and project.favorites, favorites. So that's going to return an array of strings that look as we would like them. So we're going to join those. Let's join this array. So dot join, and I want to join it with a return and a new line. So that each project takes a new line. So let's console log our format output and just check that that looks the way we want it to. Looks good. So the final thing we'll do is we'll persist that format output to the file system. Equally, we might email this to ourselves. We might push it into a database. There's so many things that we could do at this point. We've extracted the data from the website. There's so many options that we could do now. But I'm going to persist it to the file system. So to do that, at the top of the file, I'm going to import fs. I'm going to get that from node fs promises. This node colon's a namespace for Node to make sure we're getting from the Node internals. It's not essential, but it's really good practice just to make sure that we're not being name squatted by some other library that's maliciously taking over this particular namespace. And /promises is the promises version of this rather than the callback. So instead of this console log, I'm going to instead say await fs.write file. And I'll call it projects.md. And it's the format output. And then I'll console log, all done. Let's run our code. And let's check over here. Projects.md, we have projects looking good. We preview it. It looks great, apart from this first one. So I can go back and fix that. That's because we've got these two spaces before our interpolated text, which are actually being rendered here. So let's just get rid of these two spaces and save the file. When we rerun it, it's going to make a nicer version of this file. It's going to work well. So I now have the data from the website in this kind of file. I can have a look through this. This could be emailed out to me in the morning. These are the 60 most recent projects that exist there. Maybe I only want the most recent 10, or maybe I want to check just show me ones that I haven't seen yet, and I can keep track of that in some way. In that way, I'm not having to check this website every day. I can instead have Node check it for me and email me, projects where the favorites have got higher than 5. That could be interesting that I might want to have a look at. So I can use Puppeteer to do any kind of web scraping I might want to do. I can evaluate inside there and extract just using CSS selectors to find the pieces that I need to be able to get to the data I want. Is there a website that you're checking all the time to get updates on? Why don't you try testing out these skills on that site? Hope you subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.